Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of the KULCHA Symposium. Good morning, Belize. Good morning to others joining us from across the globe. Good morning to our presenters. Good morning to our viewers, to our volunteers. We welcome you back to Belize's first annual KULCHA Symposium. We have had so many great presentations these past few days, and today we'll only continue with this exciting knowledge exchange. We would like to invite all of the viewers to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are on TikTok now, so if you want additional updates from our symposium, follow us on our social media. And if you are not on social media, we are also very accessible on our email, heritagebelize@gmail.com, or on our website. You can also check us out on our YouTube channel, where this presentation is also being streamed. We welcome any donations to support our many initiatives. As you all know, Heritage Education Network Belize is a volunteer-led and community-driven, non-governmental and non-profit organization. We are a registered 501c3 in the US, so all donations are tax deductible as well. If you cannot donate, you can also support us by following us on our social media and sharing our content that you like. Thank you for taking the time out to support us and being with us here today. We hope that you will be able to continue with us on our journey to bring culture and heritage to the forefront of sustainability here in Belize and abroad. I would also like to remind our viewers that if at any point during the session you have a question for the presenters, please write that in the comments section, and we will do our best to address it during the designated question and answer time. The symposium is all about dialogue. It is all about that interchange of knowledge and information. So please don't be shy to leave those comments in our Facebook or YouTube comment section, and we will have the presenters engage with them. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. Dr. Jim Taylor is a former president of the ESAC, a council member and journal editorial on their team. His current affiliations include several universities in South Africa, and the UN Regional Center of Expertise. Dr. Jim has worked for the Wildlife and Environmental Society of South Africa for 35 years. For 20 of these years, he has served as the Director of Environmental Education. During this time, he was a founding member and project lead of the SDAC Regional Environmental Educational Program. This program continued for 15 years and now lives on in partnership with UNESCO and Rhodes University. He is an honorary life member of the WESSA and is active in several organizations, including UNESCO, where he co-chaired the ESD 2030 initiative for transforming teaching and learning environments. He is currently supporting ASPNet change projects. We are excited to welcome Dr. Taylor to grace us with a few words this morning.
Well, greetings everybody. My name is Jim Taylor, and I greet you from the southern tip of Africa, not far from the cradle of humankind, where we're told humans spread to other parts of the world. First of all, congratulations to Heritage Education Network Belize for putting on this incredible KULCHA Symposium for all of us. It really comes at a time in the world's history where we need it more than ever. We are beset with modernization, progress at all costs, consumerism that is rampant, and exploitation of the resource base, the very resources that are here to keep us alive on planet Earth. Overexploitation leads to environmental degradation, and as we'll hear later, that contributes to climate change. This conference, the Culture Symposium, is all about heritage. It's about humanity. It's about humility, connecting with each other and connecting through education. The word education comes from the Greek word educare, which means bring out the potential within. Education isn't some process where we just convey facts to others. All of us have more potential than we're realizing. Good education brings out that potential within us, and this is what the Culture Symposium is able to help us all with. So what a fantastic opportunity for all of us to learn. The Culture Symposium is designed to create a virtual space for scholars and interested persons to initiate interdisciplinary dialogue. This idea of transdisciplinarity means that all different disciplines can contribute to this building of our heritage base and our sense of humanity. It aims to bridge boundaries between academia and members of the public. All of us want to know more about what academia can teach us, and what a fantastic opportunity to learn about Belizean language, about culture, about heritage, archaeology, anthropology, and the arts, and how these affect us in daily life. All our lives could be enriched from this kind of learning. The Culture Symposium also encourages inclusivity in the cultural and heritage fields. It's joining us together and giving us all an opportunity to share each other's ideas. It provides a platform for this learning and this opportunity for sharing. The Culture Symposium also aims to create a library of research and cultural information that is accessible to the public. All that you see and hear, even this short little video clip, is going to be available online after the meeting, so we can share it at our leisure and encourage people who are teaching to perhaps share these amazing stories with your students so they can also learn about this incredible cultural history and heritage of Belize. So welcome to the third day of the Culture Symposium, and what an exciting day we have in store for us. It'll begin with traditional knowledge systems, and we'll hear from Dr. Alexandra Biar, who will teach us about the Dory and the Pitpan. These are two traditional boats or canoes that have been used for many years in Belizean inland waters. Just like in Africa, where we have the makoro, this is a traditional boat hollowed out from the log of a tree into the form of a canoe for fishing, for traveling, and it's been used for hundreds of years in Africa, just as the Dory and the Pitpan have. We'll also explore the Maya writing and the Maya mathematics in the other sessions in our first traditional knowledge systems slot. After coffee, Christopher Nesbitt will pick up on climate change and COVID. Climate change is probably the biggest threat that humanity faces at the moment. Because of the way we act, the way we use fossil fuels, we're destroying the Earth's ability to nourish and sustain life on Earth. And what better person than Christopher to take us through these ideas and explore them with us. We'll also look at crocodile research. Now, crocodiles predate the dinosaurs. Would you believe that? We have so much to learn from crocodiles. Whether they are the great Nile crocodile of Africa or the crocodiles of Central America, these creatures have lived for millions of years and teach us so much about life and living on Earth. Can folklore help save the forest is a further exploration later this morning. And culture photojournalism connects people and incredible pictures of human life. So we suggest enjoy this third day and warm greetings from all your brothers and sisters in Africa. Have a tremendous day. By organizing the Culture Symposium, the directors of Heritage Education Network Belize have put together a really powerful forum for creating a virtual space to initiate interdisciplinary dialogue, bridging boundaries between academia and the broader public, and encouraging inclusivity in cultural and heritage fields. What is special about this is it can link to other networks, and very similar to the objectives of Heritage Education Network Belize is the UNESCO Associated Schools Network, or ASPNet. ASPNet's been going for many years, and its common goal is to enable peace to develop in the minds of children and young people. There are over 11,000 ASPNet members in 182 countries. They support international understanding, peace, intercultural dialogue, sustainable development, and quality education and practice. So what a great network ASPNet could be to connect for all who are keen on the outcomes of the Culture Symposium. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for that, those lovely words, Dr. Jim Taylor. And good morning and welcome back to the first session of our final day of the Culture Symposium. As Dr. Jim Taylor summarized, we will be hearing all about knowledge systems inherited from generations of our ancestors this morning. To start, we will have a session that explores various traditional knowledge systems, from transportation on Belize's waterways, ancient writing systems, and mathematics and textiles. We will learn about how people in the past navigated their physical and ideological world and how this knowledge is still used today. So first up, we have Dr. Alexandra Biar, who is an ethnoarchaeologist attached to the CNRS within the laboratory ArcAm UMR 8096, the Archaeology of the Americas. Her research focuses on the navigation of pre-Hispanic tradition. She's currently leading an experimental archaeological project called the Maya Canoe Project, in search of the nautical and technical history of the ancient Maya on the Rio Grande, Toledo District, Belize. We will now have a presentation by Dr. Biar entitled Dory and Pitpan, Two Types of Boats Emblematic of Belize's Inland Waters. Welcome, Dr. Biar.
So, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to share with you my preliminary observation and reflections about Belize inland water navigation, and most of all about two types of emblematic watercrafts, which are the Dory and the Pitpan. This subject came naturally when I started the Maya Canoe project at the end of 2019, which is an interdisciplinary project based on maritime archaeology methodology in search of pre-Hispanic navigation traditions on the Rio Grande in the Toledo district. So when it comes to learn about inland waters, first of all, you have to learn about the extent of the waterways network, his navigability, and he is linked with human settlement, which is quite essential in this area where there is a lot of Maya sites represented here on this map, and we can observe that every one of them is located near the riverbank or a river, and that explains how the connectivity between inland and coastal settlement should have worked. So I identify 16 major watersheds for which there is some proposition of ancient names, maybe pre-Hispanic names, which is quite interesting to found. Then there is a lot of information in the institutional colonial identity for Belize, which was the ancient British Honduras, and that navigation scenes and watercrafts were used on official postcards or stamps, which make navigation and the Dory and the Pitpan quite emblematic boats in Belize history. So for the methodology, I used an interdisciplinary approach using ethnohistorical documents as scientific reports or articles about research in archaeology, anthropology, or history. What I call literature, which are the majority of the document used, and then some press documents as press cutting or postcards. Then, within the Maya Canoe project, I record more than 10 hours of interviews with 11 persons, all farmers from the San Pedro Columbia village in the Toledo district, which are all related with inland navigation and boats construction. Then I also used archaeological artifacts, and it's quite interesting to see that when it comes to pre-Hispanic canoes, most of them were found, if not all of them, in Belize. So I will mention the canoe carved in Manatee bones or the ones made of ceramic. Then I will mention the full-size paddle found by Heather McKillop and his team as some fragmented canoes underwater, and that there was mention of different canoes deposit in caves. So let's enter the subject. So beyond those theoretical data, what do we really know about inland navigation from a technical perspective? First of all, that all rivers are entirely or partially navigable and can with more or less obstacles, which have to do with the seasonality of the water level. The seasonality of water level implies technical constraint for navigation, for example, as to hold up the watercraft up the runs or falls. Then there is some mentions of booms, which are small settlements situated on the riverbank, which could be permanent if the traffic is quite intense, as on the Belize River, or ephemeral settlement as on the Rio Grande, where the traffic is much more slow. Then you have to understand that to propel your watercrafts, you will have to use both pole or paddle depending the river deep. And from an anthropological perspective, we know that inland navigation is related with spatial and social connectivity and exchange network since pre-Hispanic times. That is why since the Maya era and maybe before, people used to exchange goods using inland navigation as salt, obsidian, or other good from coastal to inland settlements and vice versa. Then during the colonial time, inland navigation was intensively used, especially during the exploitation of mahogany during the 19th and 20th century. And finally, and more interested for us, is that navigation in rivers will need required specific skills. The knowledge of some captains or paddlers' crew about the different obstacles on a river and specifically on small portion of the river make them a real rivers elite for the users. So what about those watercrafts? So we have two types of dugout canoes, which are the Dory and the Pitpan. The Dory is a small dugout canoe carved in a single log, characterized by a round bottom with a pointed bow and stern. Meanwhile, the Pitpan will be a long, narrow dugout canoe carved also in a single log, which is characterized by a flat bottom with squared bow and stern. Both canoes will need different tree species that could be used for their construction. And through all the data available so far, I could say that the cedar and the mahogany were the best species. Meanwhile, the cotton trees Santa Maria or Yemery used depend on the availability of the cedar and the mahogany. So let's start with the Dory. From ethnohistoric accounts, the Dory was introduced by the Mosquito Indians, and that there is two types of dories, one for inland navigation and another one for seagoing. That is why I found that the word dory could designate a keeled sea canoe or a narrow flat bottom canoe, depending its use and its shape. Regarding the dory uses, it's related with the individual or familial scale, and you use dory for transporting passengers, goods, for fishing or hunting, but on small distance. Then, what is the most interesting for me as a maritime ecologist is that the cargo capacity of a dory depends on its use, which is familial and individual. So a dory could carry between 90 kilograms up to 700 kilograms. Now let's focus on the pitpan. So the first description we have of the use of a pitpan in the Belize River comes from Kogoyudo in the 17th century. It seems also that pitpan is a watercraft and a word from the Mosquito Indians, which was used for the mahogany exploitation and used when motorized boat arrived just as annex. And the fact is that pitpan use is related much more as a communitarian uses to transport bulk as equipment, crop, labor force, and even to make sport. So the cargo capacity of the pitpan is quite impressive because it could carry, according to the ethnohistorical and ethnographical data, between 2 to up to 5 tons of cargo. So finally, I would like to share with you some reflections about my research. The first one comes with the cultural knowledge of navigation in Belize. How does the Mosquito Indians impact the history of inland navigation in Belize, and if the dory and the pitpan came from this indigenous community, what were the watercraft during pre-Hispanic times? That's a question. Then I found that a lot of different communities in Belize appropriate the knowledge of boat building. For example, seagoing dories are built by the Garifuna people when the river dories are built by the Maya people, which is for me very interesting because for both of them this is an emblematic and historic and identitary knowledge. Finally, I think that there is some linguistic and toponymic work to do about the river names or the watercraft names. And I just have a question that I want to submit to you today. As anyone knows if there's still any pitpan in Belize, because during my short fieldwork I didn't saw any of them. And finally, there is still rivers captains alive that could bring some stories of their knowledge. I don't know, maybe you know. Then the second part is about the scientific research. So within the Maya Canoe project, I'm interested in the cargo capacity of these inland watercrafts during Maya times for bulk transport as salt and obsidian, because it could help us with the seasonality navigation. We know that maybe there was some coordination or transition areas or booms or ports near the river mouth that could be identified. And the fact is, due to the trees which are now on the Rio Grande and specifically on the San Pedro Columbia branch, there is no politics of cleaning rivers, and I don't know if it's just local politics or a national one. Maybe you will have some answers. And finally, and it's more funny, I just would like to ask a question. Ancient Maya navigation routes are now the very soul of sports events. In Belize, it's the Ruta Maya River Challenge, and in Mexico, it's the Travesía Sagrada Maya. Both events use historic navigation routes to make sports events. But why not using traditional inland watercraft? Because I think it could be interesting for the transmission of knowledge about building techniques, for example, and because navigation and inland watercrafts seems to me to be both material and immaterial cultural heritage that could be interesting to share with all the Belizean people and the international community. So finally, that is why I propose within the Maya Canoe project to build a dory in the village of San Pedro Columbia and to navigate with it on the Rio Grande, just to experiment in my body which could be to navigate in Belize inland water. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that we'll discuss it and go further. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for that great presentation, fascinating discussion of navigating Belize's waterways, a true testament to the knowledge that can be obtained using multidisciplinary approaches. And to our viewers, please let us know in the comments if you have any responses to Dr. Biar's questions. There are several of them, so I will see if Dr. Biar could maybe put them, we can add them to the chat to see if our viewers can continue to see those questions. So next up in our session on traditional knowledge systems, we'll have a presentation from Mr. Jorge De Leon. Mr. De Leon, or Lion as he is more commonly known, has been a tour guide for over 16 years. He fell in love with history, especially with the ancient Maya culture, and developed an interest in ancient Maya writing. After attending many lectures and going through many books on glyphs, he still wanted more. After attending a workshop organized by Niche, it all came together and he decided to start sharing what he had learned. That is when he started the Maya Writing Club in 2016. He wants to thank Mount Carmel High School for allowing him to come in and share his knowledge with the students. Since then, he has been able to reach several communities throughout Belize. We will hear more about the Belize Maya Writing Club in Mr. De Leon's presentation.
All right, everybody. Hello. My name is Jorge De Leon. I am a tour guide, and I want to thank the organizers and Heritage Belize for giving us the opportunity and using this platform to reach out to the public and all the viewers. Just want to say thank you for tuning in. It's a pleasure to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been involved with. I've been a guide for over 16 years, and I fell in love with the history, the culture, and especially about the history of the ancient Maya and their achievements. And one of the things that captured my attention was the writing system and their calendrics and all the numbers. And I started really, I got hooked into this thing, and um, I was very fortunate to meet the right people at the right time, willing to share the information, and I was able to come to a very good understanding of how this writing system works. And once I got to that place, I couldn't stay with it. So I started sharing it. And in 2016, I started the Belize Maya Writing Club. Um, I really need to thank Mount Carmel High School for allowing me the opportunity to go into the school and sharing this time with the students. In 2016, we started with the first farmers and second farm students. It was just a little club. The kids really bought into the idea of this club. We program a couple trips, but their enthusiasm and hunger for understanding the system, we were able to take it to another level. And after a few months of teaching them, and I was seeing how good they were. I mean, they were great artists. They were really good drawing and understanding how the system works. Now, just to give you an idea of what we did with them is we basically went through the basics of how the system works, understanding that it is phonetically. The Maya use a combination of logograms and syllabograms, but everything we use with the students was the syllabograms. So we use a syllabary that was developed over the years, and this is where it all started. So we were doing it in English. We were applying the ancient writing system to English words and to any word the kids could come up with. And after a couple months, we were able to put together sentences, and they were writing. And I tricked my students, telling them that I was going to bring a couple friends over, and what I had prepared for them, because I knew they were ready. Talking with Sherry Gibbs, we were able to put together a nice presentation for some Gaeling students. So they came into the class, and on that same day, we had the privilege of bringing in Dr. Bruce Love, who was one of the first epigraphers to actually come to Belize, at least for me, teaching how the system works. And through his organization, MAM, has reached out to many indigenous people, many Maya people throughout Honduras and Guatemala and Belize and Mexico. So we had the opportunity to learn how the system works. And that's where everything came together. So he visited me. I took him to the school, and the kids were able to give him a presentation of how they did not know he was an archaeologist, he was an epigrapher. And they didn't know that my friends that I brought over, that they were Gaeling students. So now we had high school kids teaching Gaeling students something about the history and the Maya writing. So that was really cool that we were able to do that. And, that just brought a lot of, satisfaction to the kids. And, their nervousness and everything just sort of left their bodies and they were able to concentrate more and they wanted more. And when I saw how naturally they were teaching and everything was just moving, I said, no, they're ready. So then we started reaching out to other communities. I had already started to go and reach out to communities throughout Belize. And I had made a trip down south. And on my second trip down south to this community, I was able to take my students down there to see how it was that I was teaching this to the Maya community down south. So I took them with us. We went down there. We started teaching, and from there, many doors started opening. We went down and we started teaching. We started getting invited to different events that Niche was organizing, Museum Week, Archaeology Day, and we were out there sharing with the public how the system works, writing their names using the hieroglyphs. So here we have some examples of what we were doing. So we would take their names, break it phonetically, take each syllable, and get the representation of the glyphs, and put together a hieroglyph that would represent the name of the person. So that was really cool that we were able to do that. With the students, we went down to Tumulkin. We were invited to Maya Day. We shared what we were doing down there. We were able to go to Corozal, the House of Culture in Corozal. We did a hieroglyphic workshop up there. We teamed up with UB, and we did a couple of workshops with them as well. So we've been reaching out throughout the whole country and getting the word out. Here we are at another event that was held at Cajalpech. I think this was another archaeology day that was celebrated at Cajalpech. So we've been very active since 2016, and trying to get people to understand how the system works. Now, as a tour guide, I have also shared this with a lot of my colleagues, a lot of tour guides, because I think it is very important for us to understand something this beautiful. And when we're taking our guests to the different Maya sites, it is important for us to be there and being able to give them a little bit more. Now, not every tourist that comes wants to know in depth everything about the Maya history, everything about the writing system. But it is important for us to have that understanding so that when the person shows up who really wants to know more, then you have it. It's a tool that it's going to be very useful to you. So I've been putting myself out there, sharing this information, making this information available to the guides and to the public. And, I appreciate when people come up to me and say, can you come up and, give us a little workshop? Tell me more about this. Whether it's an individual or it's an organization or a group of people, or it's a community or a village, we're always willing to go there and share this information that we have and the knowledge that we've gained over the years. Now, like I was saying, as a guide, it is important for us to understand it, and also as a people, something that amazing that we have. So applying what you learn and taking the kids out to the sites, I was able to bring them there and take them to these monuments. And, it's so fulfilling to see kids go to the monuments and start to see some of the syllables that they've used to create their names. They go, oh, I recognize this one. I recognize this other one. So it's really important to see how they connect. And when you have somebody that speaks Maya and comes to a monument and says, hey, this glyph says this sound plus this sound. Hey, wait a minute. I recognize that. There's a word in my language that's similar to that. So this is where, one of the things that is really fulfilling for me to see that connection being made by our Maya today, with something that was written hundreds of years ago by the Maya that lived here in Belize. Take, for example, this panel of Shunantonich. This was recently found. And here we have hieroglyphs. Now, these hieroglyphs are made up of logograms and syllabograms. But I want to pick just on one particular glyph that is here, and I'm going to take on this portion right here. Check this out. So here we have, several hieroglyphs, but we have logograms and we have syllabograms. This portion right here, this word, is made up of 3 syllables, so 3 syllabograms. And this is what I tell my students. We're going to create a word. You will take a word, break it into syllables, and make a glyph for it. So here's a perfect example, something that was written in a classic period, but now look at what we have there. We have 3 syllables. The first one, which is on the upper section, that is ma. So this phonetic sound ma. In the middle, you have cha. And at the very bottom, there's ha. But when you put it together, these 3 syllables produce the word machach. Now, machach in the classic period was a word used as a negation. A negation would be a word saying like something negative, like there is nothing, there is nada, so it's not there, it's been lost. So that's a negation. So bringing this on this monument, we will read it machach. The logogram that follows it is kawil. And the kawil on the lower portion has a syllable. That syllable is the li glyph. So here we have machach, kawil, tan, chen, kuhul, kanul. And then, so here is where the whole thing comes together, right? Because we have a combination of logograms and syllabograms, right? And when you talk to our Maya today, you say, hey, look at what they were writing. Machach kawil. There is no kawil, there is no power. The power was lost. So machach. But then you talk to somebody who speaks Yucatec and you say, how you say no, nothing, You say ma. In another Maya language, you say mak'a. Well, that is what our people are speaking today. That's the negation, that's the syllable. And we look back in the past, what are the Maya using? They're saying machach, right? So this is the beauty of making that connection and seeing our people being able to connect with their past. So that's one of the objectives. Oh, of course, it's just the beginning of our journey. I dream with one day our people who speak Yucatec, our people who speak Mupan and Quechua could come to a better understanding of how the system works so that when they show up to the Maya sites, it's more than just a stone monument with some beautiful drawings and carvings, because the stones are talking to us, and we've had a lot of, our archaeologists, epigraphers have been foreigners, have been people who, they've come to love the history and intrigued by this particular writing system. And here we are, we live here. It's here with us. It's something we've lost, but now it's time to bring it back and to have it. We need to treasure it. So I really hope that my presentation sparks an interest by our Belizean people and, reach out to me so that we could, put together sessions, whether it's, well, at the moment we need to do an online session, but, when everything is over, we could go back to face and I could go back to, traveling the country and reaching out to the communities in the south, in the central area, in the western area, in the northern part of the country. Looking forward to us being back on the road and being back out there, sharing what we love. So I just want to leave this with everybody. I just want to say that, let's, make that extra effort, get in touch with me. Let's put together something. And, you know, if you want to learn, I am here willing to teach, and I'm willing to share this information. Heritage Belize, thank you for the platform. Everyone who tuned in, thank you very much. And, you know, I hope that we could hook up very soon and we could all get started drawing and writing some hieroglyphs. So I want to thank everybody and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you so much, Lion, for this presentation and all of the amazing work you're doing as a tour guide, as well as spearheading the Maya Writing Club. We're getting lots of love for you in the comments, so just make sure everybody's checking those out, ask your questions, and I'll be adding some questions from Dr. Biar that the audience can respond to in the comments as well. So rounding off our presentations for this first thematic session is Mr. Myron A. Medina. Mr. Medina is a born and raised Belizean from Santa Elena, Cayo. He is a PhD candidate, ABD, at the University of British Columbia in Canada. He was an OAS scholar in 2010 and 2016. He also wears the hats of mathematics education researcher and university lecturer. His research interests include curriculum studies research, mathematics education, qualitative research methodologies, pedagogy, research design and method, sensory ethnography, mathematical research, ethnomathematics, indigenous mathematics, and culture and the senses. But his first love has and continues to be mathematics. We will hear more about his love for these topics in his presentation entitled Weaving Indigenous Maya Mathematics Alongside Maya Elders in Belize. Welcome, Mr. Medina.
Morning, everyone. My name is Myron Medina, and I will be presenting my research entitled Weaving Indigenous Mathematics Alongside Maya Elders in Belize. So the outline for this presentation will focus on 3 parts. First, I will discuss conventional views and treatment of mathematics. Second, I will discuss my research, giving an overview. Third, I will be discussing a reimagining of mathematics. So the first part, conventional view of math. We, for the most part, have this view of math as being universal. There is a single universal logic governing all thought. It is often viewed as immutable, impeccable, and irrefutable. For example, the irrefutable certainty that if I write 2 + 2, the answer is 4. If I write the number 2, 4, 6, then logically the next number in the sequence is 8. And this has been, for the most part, people's view and experiences, and this is how math is treated in schools. Students are taught a single approach towards a single answer, that is just one answer, and there's only a few steps that you need to memorize to get that answer. So generally, math is presented as body-free, culture-free, and history-free. Therefore, a logical question to ask is, but is math truly absolute and ahuman? Can you learn it without using your body? Is it without culture? Is it without history? Early in my research, when I was exploring this notion of culture and math, I came to recognize that in Central America, math does not begin with the European missionaries. It begins over 2,000 years ago with our ancestors, the Maya. And there is recorded evidence in history of this case. As you can see here, we have 4 surviving Maya books called codices. They're named after the location where they were, quote unquote, discovered. We have here the Paris Codex, the Madrid Codex, and we have the Dresden Codex and also the Greuler Codex. One of the things that you could look at here with the Greuler Codex is the number system that the Maya utilized. Many people are familiar with this number system, the way it works. The Maya invented the notion of 0. They counted in groups of 20, meaning units, 20s, 400s, 8,000s. They're always counting by multiple or powers of 20s. My research, in a nutshell, my study argues that an exploration of indigenous math ways of knowing, doing, and being through culture-based practices of Maya elders can enact and create a more enlivening and empowering mathematics curriculum. I use the term weaving as a metaphor to conceptualize math as a fabric of intertwined concepts. I use it as a means to explore specific mathematical knowing in and through these strands of cultural fibers. My study argues that mathematics, far from being immaterial and disembodied, meaning absolute, abstract, and eternal, is rather deeply material, human, and cultural. I use sensory ethnography, meaning the senses, as my core methodology to explore and study contemporary Maya practices by paying close attention to the sensory experiences, ways of experiencing, and ways of knowing and being. This sensory ethnographic study focuses on learning through the embodied, enacted ecological knowledge of the Maya that has been cultivated through generations in close contact with nature. This study uses contemporary practices to contextualize and explore indigenous Maya mathematics. The way I carried out my research was that I documented and interpreted participants' way of knowing, reasoning, and sensory experiences through participant observations, on-course conversations. So we would walk and discuss and dialogue, whether it was in the rainforest or weaving a basket or just sitting together and talking or enjoying the sunset. I used photography, I used participants' collaborative work. I did partake in a lot of these practices as well, and my own personal fieldwork. At its heart, my study explores mathematics as a creative, cultural, and human form of expression. It is a journey of discovery and a spiritual world. What I will present now to you are these thematic themes that I have that has emerged from my time walking alongside my elders. And one of the ones that I very fond of is this one that I've titled Into the Rainforest, experiencing time as cyclical. In our Western world, we view not math, but time as being linear. If you look at the calendar, there's 30 days to an average of 30 days to every month, 365 days. But there's something about being placed in a setting like the rainforest that allows you to experience time in cycles. For the Maya, if you look at the way they plant corn, the milpa system is imbued with a lot of cycles. One of the things that I got to experience by being in the rainforest, spending time with my elders, you could observe certain things around you. You could sense the change in temperature. You could sense when it's midday. You could sense when the sun is setting. Your notion of time is sort of more of an embodied experience rather than an abstract concept. This notion of cycles became very apparent to me by being in this setting. When you think about math and how we view math, it's always seen as these topics that are very linear. We don't often treat them as being connected and part of a larger cycle. This also became more apparent to me when I spent time with my elders in the Milpa, and what I titled this topic here, this theme is called Milpa Math. And one of the ones that was really captivating for me was what I have titled Dance of the Maize Farmer. And how this works, I will discuss this a little bit so that you could have a more contextualized view of what I mean by this. I view the way the farmer plants his corn as a mathematical dance ritual. And here's what it looks like. The farmer starts at the far end of his field, so he would poke a hole through the white ash with a dibble stick. In his other hand, he takes a small handful of seeds. Usually these seeds average 5 from his waste bag, and reverently and gracefully drops them into the earth. The farmer then takes one step forward, leaving his other foot planted behind, pokes another hole, and gently drops his seed into the earth. He repeats this rhythmic pattern along an imaginary line. Right step, a whole, seeds. Left step, a whole, seeds. Right step, a whole, seeds, and so on. After reaching the end of a line, the boundaries of his field, the farmer turns around and begins planting along a new line in the opposite direction. For me, this became quite interesting because observing it and even partaking in it, you recognize that it is a performance piece of sorts. It is a performance that incorporates rhythmic movement, but much more than that, it is very sacred. I call it sacred because through this very practice that has existed for millennia, the farmer is literally and figuratively walking in the footsteps of our ancestors. Other notions that came out of this context was cycles, the notion of nothingness. You have to clear the land and it almost looks like it's decay and dying, but then within a few cycles, there's life and food. This also provides a source of food for animals that are nearby. The notion of oneness, two-ness, even, odd, when this farmer is stepping forward and moving along the line, you could actually embody that notion of something being even, something being odd. There's certainly order and structure to this form of knowing. The other one that I explored was also certain weaving practices. And this is core and central to my writings because I conceptualize weaving as a metaphor. It was only by engaging and walking alongside my elders and going through these processes of doing and being that I walked away with a new view of mat. This one, we can see that the farmer is thatching the roof, but there are very specific patterns to it that if you study it, it's not arbitrary. The roof, the way they thatch the roof is very structured and ordered. Here are a few sketches of what I attempted to analyze alongside my elders. You can see him in the right-hand side showing me how this weaving process works. At the bottom was our collaboration in terms of trying to formalize what that looks like. But another thing that you must recognize is that when you think about cultural mat, it is not textbook mat. It is a different form of mat. It is one that has to be experienced to be appreciated. The other one that I also looked at was the basket weaving. A lot of us are familiar with baskets in Belize. We see them at the market squares from these artisans, these weavers. But one of the things that I was very captivated by was that the process that they utilized is not just random. It is much more than that. It's much more cultural. There are specific times of the year that you can harvest these reinforced plant fibers. They're hand processed. There's a whole step-by-step approach to it. But when they begin to weave sort of in this spiral representation, you could actually feel certain number counts that you are doing. And it is a very meticulous process that allows you to consciously pay attention to these certain patterns and these in and out weaving. The notion of even and odd also came out of this. For me, you're moving through the specific patterns and the fibers almost guides your fingers in that. A colleague of mine who's also a mathematician has been exploring the primes, and it's quite interesting how George Aldana, represented the prime numbers, the way they behave sort of in this spiral pattern. And when I recognized it, I was, wait a minute, when you're thinking about weaving in sort of a spiral pattern formation, those numbers become alive. They take on new meaning for you. And so that was quite captivating, as these two can present a link between cultural, tangible, tactile math versus the dry, black and white, abstract written one that we are familiar with and can be very off-putting to learners. The other one here you can see are more examples of basket weaving. And as I mentioned, one of the core things about my research is that I utilize weaving as a means to look at indigenous forms of knowing and being and contextualize it. These practices have existed for thousands of years. And one of the things that is really quite interesting is that what this does is that it presents a medium for learners of math, even experienced mathematician, to explore math in and through these strands of cultural fiber. I call them cultural fiber because they're imbued with deep esoteric meaning of Maya life. It is not just to be taken as what math can I extract from this practice. It is much more about connecting them as a whole. The other one that I also explored was textile patterns. We look at embroidery and the backstrap looming. Now, the process is a very complex one. Many visitors and Belizeans are familiar with these colorful fabrics, but much more than being aesthetically beautiful, they actually have very specific symbolic meaning for the Maya people and the weavers who engage in these sort of practices. Here, what I will present to you is just a quick snapshot of this looming process. And if you look at the left-hand side, you'll notice very specific patterns. These are not arbitrary and far from being colorful and aesthetically pleasing to the eye. As I've mentioned, they're very symbolic and possess deep meaning of Maya culture. It is a way of life that has survived the test of time, and you can observe the various shapes that are used. For example, we have the intertwining shape, we have the cornstalk shape, we have the spiral. The spiral, if you were to count the number of lines, it actually comes up to 11. These numbers are not arbitrary. When you think about the number 11, that's a prime number, and what we can see here is there's specific counts that are carried out that is a form of knowing that's part of the weaver. They're not doing this almost by accident or out of the blue. They're really paying close attention to the process that's going on. And if you look at concepts in math, we could talk about symmetry, isosymmetries. We could talk about these number patterns that can arise from just going through these motions of weaving. One of the things you must understand is that this, even though it looks here as very beautiful, it is a very time-consuming process, but that hard work that goes into it actually helps to create humility. A lot of the weavers that I met are very humble weavers. It can sometimes take up to 6 months to complete a single project. And again, what was very captivating to me was not only the patterns that come along with it, but that the math that these weavers are using is an embodied form of knowing. It is very intrinsic to what they do, and certainly requires a tremendous amount of patience. The very essence of this process, as I've mentioned, allowed me to conceptualize a new view and treatment of math as a colorful fabric of intertwined concepts that allows us to deeply understand the world around us and ourselves. I argue that by deliberately and consciously paying attention and touching each thread, each fiber, our understanding of numbers, patterns, symmetry becomes much more profound. On the right-hand side, you could see a picture depicting what this process looks like. And it is a very meticulous process. If you look at the sketch that I did right next to it, every strand of fiber will be touched by this weaver. The pattern that they're going to create will be touched by their hands. And again, what I want to emphasize is that these indigenous forms of knowing and of being and doing, as I have come to study them, have existed for thousands of years, and it's quite interesting to see them still being utilized today. The sketch at the bottom right-hand corner, you could see the pattern if you would look at it from left to right. I've coded it. The O means over, U means under. So there's a very specific pattern to this weaving technique. It's a very intrinsic weaving technique that is utilized. So it's almost looks like under, over, under, over, under, over, and it's very circular as well. So as I've mentioned, these practices lend for a more visceral felt experience of concepts that can be embodied. And I dedicate this presentation to the Maya people of Belize, my elders, and especially the Maya women and children.
Thank you so much, Mr. Medina. Amazing work. And thank you for bringing numbers and mathematics to life within a sensory and cultural perspective. How amazing. These traditional knowledge systems deserve a platform to bring them to the forefront and keep them alive. And we thank our presenters for doing just that. So now I would like to welcome our presenters to the live Q&A session. So we'll be adding them to the stream. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. So first, I just want to present to our audience the questions that Dr. Biar had, just to see if anybody has any insight. Are there still Pitpans on the rivers of Belize? And do you know any former river captains? So if anybody has any insight here, please leave a message in the comments. I think Dr. Biar is already in the comment section, so you can probably message her directly if she's okay with that. But yeah, so we will try to get at least one question per presenter. We have a lot of questions in the comments. If we don't get to you, I would encourage the presenters to go in and look at the comment section after we're done here, and you're welcome to respond to these questions. So we have a question from Miss Francilia Pau. It looks like, what are the main rivers used inland navigation in Belize? Is there an estimated in length that they travel?
So as I put in the chat, the thing is, all the rivers in Belize are navigable, partially or entirely. And for example, if you want to go from the Kekchi Maya village of San Pedro Columbia to Punta Gorda, it will need 2 days of navigation, and it's about 35 kilometers long. So I think that they could travel on very long distance just navigating.
Great. Thank you for that response, Vivian.
You're welcome.
I think maybe we should have a question next for Mr. De Leon. How would I be able to be a part of that? Is it open to anyone or just high school students? Lion, do you have any insight?
Yes, well, it's open to everyone and ages, as long as willing to learn and put in the work. I think we could just organize ourselves and try to create, figure a way to meet online and give you the material and then just follow up with all the information. And then as soon as we can travel and we can meet face to face, then we could organize ourselves better. But yeah, no age, and as long as you're willing to put in the work and read, and yeah, but definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Mr. De Leon. You're doing great work, and it seems like you're, anybody who's willing to learn is welcome, right? It's a little hard to hear you on your mic, so if it's possible, you can move the mic closer for if that's possible. Okay. I think you're in the comment section too already, right, Lion? You have some invitations to a linguistics class at UB and things like that. All right. Let's see. We have a question from Miss Erica Chun. Why do you think the Belize school system does not use the ancient Maya writing system? Oh, there we go. Great. Welcome, okay. Mr. De Leon.
Sorry, what was the question?
It's up on the screen. It's from Miss Erica Chun. She says, why do you think the Belize school system does not use the ancient Maya writing system?
Well, I think one of the things is that we don't have a structure that the Ministry of Education can use at the moment. So, and then most of our teachers don't have the full understanding or a better understanding of how the system works. So it's hard to implement it throughout. So I think we would have to work with a lot of the teachers and the ministry to bring it in. Um, I have tried to approach several of the schools and working with the kids. So it's just a matter of us wanting to put in the work and creating those partnerships with the Ministry of Education so that we could create some sort of syllabus or something that the teachers can use. And I think we have enough information, and there's enough people within this community that is willing to put in the work and put together the material, and then just do workshops and visit all the schools that want to start to implement it. And just like Mount Carmel did it, and starting to include it as a club is important. And once we've created that club, and the school can see and the teachers can get involved, then we could multiply that and reach out to more schools. But definitely the Ministry of Education needs to connect with us and uh, make the workshops available for the teachers so that everybody can start with the basics.
Absolutely. It's about laying the foundation at an early age and getting everyone that knowledge so that it can continue to be perpetuated, right?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So we have an actual question between Dr. Biar and Mr. Medina, who are both our presenters. It seems there's connections here. Dr. Biar says, I suppose there was a link between canoe construction and math. The only measures used were not metric, as the body was the scale. What do you think, Mr. Medina? Oh, I think you're muted.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah, most definitely, I would say that there is a link because one of the things that we look at math, we often see it as being textbook math, but when you actually are out in the real world carrying out some of these constructions, a lot of it has to do with body measurements. When you think about the ruler back in ancient Egypt, they used definitely like strings, and when you look about creating circles, a stick and a string would do the job, and that creates a more embodied way of actually measuring things. And I would agree, yes, that there is definitely a link with canoe constructions. Remember, they weren't steel back then, they weren't like these rulers that they could use, but having a knowledge of body measurements. And of course, I would say yes, that there's definitely a link with that process.
Awesome. I see so many connections between your work and
Yeah, we
everything
should
now.
share
So,
content.
yeah. And you guys, if you're comfortable, we are willing to share your contacts between each other. So, I think we have another question. How about the Maya embroidery? Do they have a mathematical formula that could be taught to the younger generation? I think this is for Mr. Medina.
So my work has been looking at not so much that formalistic view of what math is, and when I got into this field, I literally did not know what I was going to discover. But the more I spent time with it, I recognized that there is no math formula for it. One of the beautiful things about the weaving process, as we see it today, is that the process itself is the math, and it is about going through the process that you walk away with having a much more rich understanding of what math can be. And like I mentioned earlier, it was only by engaging in this process that I recognized that weaving is a beautiful metaphor for a lot of things we do. And so math, the way I conceptualize it, is that it is a process. It is full of colors. It is a tapestry. It is all these connections that are deeply imbued. And I think that what we can aim for is that perhaps with the younger generation is making this available to them. and recognizing that there is no formula, there is no answer. It's what you make of it and what you walk away from it. And that has been the process of math. Mathematicians do math like this. It's just that when we communicate it, it's always black and white and textbook, which isn't necessarily the process.
Absolutely, it's beautiful as you create as you rightfully said, right? I think we have another comment from Mr. DeShield, Dr. DeShield, one of our other presenters from yesterday, I believe. Myron, ought we to combine subjects to show various lessons present in one cultural activity rather than separating subjects into discrete disciplines? Curious about your thoughts on pedagogy.
I'm a huge advocate for like the liberal arts as it pertains to teaching knowledge, and for me, having subjects that are separate creates more of a disconnection of sorts. So when we look at physics, biology, chemistry, math, they're all isolated in their own field. But when you're actually out in the real world, these are very much connected to one another. And how do you go about solving a problem? You can have an engineer knowledge, a way of expressing it might not be in the textbook. So I would, for me, in an ideal educational system, yes, I would not get rid of the subjects, but see how they're connected to one another, because that is the process of solving real world problems.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We have another one. What exactly is the link between canoe construction and math? Ms. Zenny Garcia. I think Dr. Biar, you had seen the connection, right?
Yeah, I think she should answer now.
Oh, I think
have to
oh, there we go.
Precise calculation because your canoe will depend on the size of the trunk. But you will have to conceptualize from a metric point of view, which will be the dimension, the size of your canoe. So you will have to do math.
Absolutely. And maybe even the metric system has a similar sort of sensory and embodiment to it, as Mr. Medina has pointed out from Maya traditions, right?
Exactly.
So I think that it's by bringing this perspective to something like math, where we just think it's this sort of universal culturalist system, you're really bringing out something that maybe people can relate to more, right? I think it's great. It's great. I think we have another one from Mr. Medina. How would you teach this math to students at the primary level? Is there a formula?
Well, just let me, because I know we're coming to a close, thank Hen B for an amazing job. You guys are trailblazers in this field. It's the first for Belize's history, I believe. What I think we can take away from all of these wonderful presentations is that I think that they are definitely Belizean intellects, scholars, people that are very active in the field, but I think we don't ever meet. We're always like in our offices working alone. So to answer this question, I would love to see maybe all of us coming together. I know Mr. Leon does a wonderful job with the Maya writing system that has a lot of patterns to it. And so I think when teaching kids at the primary school level, I think it's more about getting that exposure to them. And I think Mr. Leon probably could answer this question because he's the one who's actually been in the schools actively engaging students with this process. I haven't been so much there yet, but hopefully one day when it comes to that, I think one way we can do it is through collaborative work, through like this wonderful platform that we have here, and actually getting out there, getting into the schools and making it available rather than just here. And let's see what the next generation can make of these wonderful people like you guys that are there actually trying to get it out, getting exposure. And I think that's one of the shortfalls of our system in education. We don't often talk about these things as much as we should, and I think getting it to students is a really wonderful first step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for those kind words, but we couldn't do it without people like you doing such great work. And we really hope that this can bring holistic connections and collaboration I think that all of these traditional knowledge systems overlap so much, and it would be great to bring you all together and create some sort of primary teaching pedagogy, right? I think it's really important. I think we have maybe time for one more question. Let's see. Do you think that our generation has a mathematical interest in embroidery? This is
I believe that yes, I think in general a lot of us are doing some of these practices, but we haven't really linked it to like well, I don't like to say formal math because every single human being does math from the day you wake up. You're figuring out the quickest way to get work, and that's solving a math problem. You're figuring out how to do certain things that are very structural and ordered. I think our generation is very much engaged in some of these what I call tangible practices. And in terms of embroidery, I think like with this context, people that are weavers have always been doing it for that's their livelihood. They do it on a constant basis. Our generation, I think, there is an interest definitely in a new way of seeing math, and not just embroidery. When you think about other things that people do, look at the construction worker. He knows a lot of math. And the things that other people might not consider math, it is math because there is when you're counting with your fingers or looking at I don't know, like even with technology, you are constantly engaged in practices that are very much interesting, is an intrinsic thing. The question asked, does our generation have that math interest? I think it's off-putting when we teach it sort of like black and white and abstract. Not just embroidery, but think about artisans that are weaving and braiding hair. They're going through patterns there, and so there's a lot of practices in our daily lives and cultures that are unique to certain cultures that is there as part of their society, and the mathematical interest has been there. Maybe it can't necessarily be like taken to be okay, not everyone will be a mathematician, but everyone does math.
Yes, absolutely. I think that by a lot of what your guys' work does is it humanizes these systems that we've perhaps sort of dehumanized, and so it's really important to put the human back in and see that it is used on a daily basis. These things are important, and we need to teach them as such. Otherwise, we will lose the interest of the students. So it's really great, and for the next generation, we need to keep this holistic perspective going, and bringing out these traditional knowledge systems. It's really great, everything that all of you guys are doing. So I think we're out of time for the live Q&A. I would just encourage our presenters to go back to the comments. We have quite a few individuals who are interested in connecting, and just a lot of love in the comment section. So if you guys are interested, please check it out after we end, and we look forward to working with any of you guys if you are interested. Thank you again for being here. And so after this, we'll have a quick coffee break for about 15 minutes, and we will be back at 10:15 for the thematic session, Traditional Ecological Knowledge. So sort of continuing this theme of traditional knowledge systems. Thank you again. We'll see you shortly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
you.
Welcome back. There we go, great. Welcome back to the Belize KULCHA Symposium. We are back this morning with the continuation of our discussion on traditional knowledge systems, but this next thematic session has more of a focus on our ecological knowledge. Is even more clear now than ever before that our interactions with each other and the natural world need to be informed by generational knowledge to sustain us into the future. We will begin our session learning about this knowledge to address climate change in the context of our current crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. We will also hear about traditional ecological knowledge of Cohune cultivation and production as a means to maintain Belize's forests, as well as the mighty crocodiles that protect Belize's waterways. Our first presentation is by Mr. Christopher Nesbitt. Mr. Nesbitt emigrated to Belize in 1985. Since 1988, he has been working on degraded land repair on formerly depleted citrus and cattle land, focused on agroforestry and food security in San Pedro, Colombia. He managed the Toledo Cacao Growers Association from 1997 to 2004, increasing membership from 225 farmers to over 700. In 2004, he started the Maya Mountain Research Farm on his farm, designed as a living classroom of agroforestry, focused on climate change mitigation and adaptation, and carbon drawdown through land use. The farm has hundreds of species of plants and multiple cultivars of those plants. We are excited to learn more about these passions of Mr. Nesbitt's in his presentation, Addressing Climate Change in the Time of COVID. Welcome, Mr. Nesbitt.
Good day. My name is Christopher Nesbitt. My wife, Selene Logan Nesbitt, and I manage a small NGO called Maya Mountain Research Farm located in San Pedro, Colombia, Toledo district. We're focused on climate change, mitigation and adaptation, income generation through the intersection of agriculture and ecology, and food security. The NGO was founded in 2004, but the farm itself was founded in 1988 when I bought a degraded citrus and cattle farm. So let's define some degraded lands that we're likely to see in Belize. All over Belize, we have former cattle pastures that are degraded where the soil is compacted. We have citrus groves that have come to the end of their productive lifespan. Banana plantations that have come to the end of their productive lifespan are being abandoned. Overworked milpa slash and burn, where proper fallow rotational cycles aren't being observed and fertility is dropped. Any export-based monoculture, including sugar and banana and pineapple, etc. Fire-damaged landscapes. And for working with climate change mitigation and adaptation and sort of regenerating landscapes, degraded landscapes are some of the low-hanging fruit. Worldwide, there's 950 million to 1.1 billion acres of degraded agricultural landscapes. So in the 1980s, and in the last 40 years, Belize went from having 74.4% forest cover in 1980. In 2010, we had 62.8% forest cover, and 70 years later, we had dropped to 57.6% forest cover. So not only is the forest disappearing, but the rate of destruction is increasing. Because of a combination of shifting cultivation, cattle ranching, and monocultures, and for export. One of the problems that we see working in agroforestry is that a damaging event that happens many years is escaped agricultural fires. This is an agricultural fire that occurred across the river from where I live, and it burned many acres and escaped. And this happens every year. I worked at Toledo Cacao Growers Association from 1997 to 2004 and ran the extension program. And these were some farmers that we were working that were outside of the area that we had been working in. They were farmers up in Trio Junction, and Bella Vista. And so they had all, they're from El Salvador and Honduras, and all of them, three of them there, the man with the notebook is my neighbor Ignacio Ash. Three men there had planted out 4 or 5 acres of cacao apiece, and a fire just came and erased it after about 4 years worth of work. It was a truly big tragedy. Another thing that we're seeing, the creation of degraded landscapes, is where people are clearing into land that's simply not suitable for agriculture. This is a hillside that my wife and I used to pass when we were teaching at Tumulkeen School of Learning. And we would pass it, and some Guatemalan refugees who were in Toledo district squatted that land. That's basically crown land behind private land, where they cleared into the hillside and revealed that there was a lot of limestone, not a lot of soil, and they planted corn, and the corn crop, of course, didn't do very well. And but in addition to the small yield that they got for the amount of energy they expended, they erased all the ecosystem services that primary habitat provided, which was soil and soil moisture retention, habitat creation, and of course the big one everybody's talking about, carbon sequestration. We'll see more of that as people are looking for land to farm. We're beginning to see some of the problems associated with climate change. In 2017, the foothills of the Maya Mountains were hit with a series of one big kind of flooding event then that was not expected. And this is a vega up in San Benito Poite, a photo taken by my friend Valentino Schall, showing what happened to the corn crop there. Of course, we have a vega, and we grow corn and other stuff, and we lost a lot of our corn. But the pumpkin was actually tenacious and held on, and we ended up doing okay with it, but we didn't do well with corn. Other problems, we're seeing drought. This is a photo taken by my friend Louis Sewell at Citrus Growers Association, showing a corn crop that failed up in Cayo district. One that we saw was on the Hummingbird Highway, I think near Middlesex. And this is a cornfield that's been cropped repeatedly. I imagine they're using a fair amount of fertilizer. It's very intensive, very closely planted. I'm sure it's very, very productive in years where it produces. But this is the second time they planted. The first time they planted it, they had very little germination, and a lot of it died that did germinate. And so they planted it again when they had a window of soil moisture, and then the whole crop failed as well. So that's what we can look forward to, and how do we become less vulnerable then. So I put this in here because I'm bragging, and I won an award, or the farm won an award from the Commonwealth for innovation and sustainable development under the prosperity category. And I got to meet Prince Harry and the Secretary General, who's wonderful. And while I was over there, my stepson Wilfredo Magana, who's in the picture, who's a second lieutenant in the Belize Defense Force, came to the award ceremony, and we got to talk. Somebody took this picture. I put it in there mostly because it was a pivotal moment for us, because it was the first time we had people who understood exactly what we were talking about when we talked about how do we draw down carbon using degraded land and increase food security. And so it was a big moment for me. There's a web page called drawdown.org for Project Drawdown, and they list like 80 or 90, I think it's up to 100 something now, ways to actually mitigate or draw down carbon out of the environment. And so this is the land use and ocean use, of course. And out of this, basically everything that they're talking about here can be done in Belize, most of it, with the exception of things like temperate reforestation and peatland restoration. We don't have, we're not a temperate environment, and we don't have peatland. But all these are ways to draw down carbon. They're actually quantified and show some of them. And so, and this is where we are. This is where my wife and I live, and we're about 2 miles upriver from San Pedro, Colombia. And I bought a degraded citrus and cattle farm back in the late 1980s, and quickly found out the cattle were no good by looking at other pastures. I got rid of the cattle within a few months, and about a year into it, I realized that the citrus was at the end of its productive lifespan, and I started thinking about what to do. And I decided to create a multi-strata agroforestry system with timber and food and tree legumes and subcanopy species like cacao and coffee and turmeric and ginger and vanilla and stuff like that. The first step you have to do when you're doing this is you have to look at ways to build fertility and also obtain a yield. So pioneer species are actually really useful for this. There's a whole bunch of them, things like pigeon pea, gandules or chicharro, the cajanas cajan, which fix nitrogen and help break up soil and inject carbon into the soil. There's other things like peanuts, and that are also legumes. And then there's, in this picture, we have cassava, which breaks up soil, chayo, which provides shade, banana, which changes the structure of the soil and also provides biomass. Things like the pigeon pea is actually really useful, and it's not a big food here in Belize, but our neighbors eat a lot of it. And when I was in the Dominican Republic, they ate a lot of it. Also in Costa Rica, they eat a lot of it. And this is a potentially important food for the future. It's a semi-perennial, fixes nitrogen, and this is actually taken in 2019 in the middle of the drought, where basically the farm looked like the whole farm had been soaked with some kind of herbicide. We don't use herbicides. Everything was really dry, but the pigeon pea was green. Pineapples planted on contour help to retain soil, and the detritus and leaf litter and animal manure that accumulates uphill from the pineapple help to create zones of fertility. And of course, with the banana intercrop, we're getting yield out of it as well from the banana. But this area here is a future coconut-dominated polyculture. We have got the bright idea that we're going to plant lots of coconuts and retire making coconut oil and get rich doing that. Banana, again, another important pioneer species, provides a lot of biomass, provides a lot of food. This is Jamaica Red, and some of the bananas we have are, on the left, Pijang Rai banana, in the middle is apple banana, to the right is Jamaica Red banana, and the one to the back is Blogo banana. Some of them are hand bananas, some of them are cooking bananas, and they're all important for food security. We also feed them to our poultry. So Forester Farm, this is what we're aiming for, is we're looking for a way to convert our farm into something that mimics the arboreal architecture of primary habitat, with the exception that every species in there either has a direct use for us or has a use for the system. So things like there's a Cephalopoenia pulcherrima, which is pretty, but it doesn't really actually provide much for us. It does fix nitrogen, it does provide fodder for pollinators. And there's other things in there. The keystone of all of this, of course, is food. And so for staple trees, we're really interested in tropical staple trees, including things like breadnut, the Artocarpus camansi, very high yielding. One tree can produce up to 1,200 pounds of food. Breadfruit, very important, common in Belize, but underutilized, and every farmer should have some. And then, of course, Ramon nut, Brassomum malacostrum, where we live at the foothills of the Maya Mountain, there's limestone, another potentially important food, and one that's been historically important in Toledo District and throughout Mesoamerica. Peach balm, or Bactris gassipace, also known as Pejibaya, is a important staple food. We worked in the Amazon, and the community we were working with there, that was a staple food for them. One tree can produce up to 160 pounds of food a year. And this is an example of one day. We walked out, and about 45 minutes of my friend Marlon Sutherland and I walking around collecting food. We collected all of this, and off of his right shoulder are 2 buckets of bread nut that we didn't take a picture of, but plenty of food that we collected fairly leisurely. And I'll say that things like the coconut, we make coconut oil, and the partially defatted meat has value as animal fodder. Cacao is a subcanopy species, an anchor crop that provides yield. Toledo district produces cacao equal to the best cacao anywhere in the world. And I've been to Venezuela, and I can say that Toledo cacao is as good as anything they produce. Things like vanilla, another underutilized plant species that is common in Toledo district in the bush, but very few people farm it. It's very high value. 1 kilo is worth about 500 pounds, $500 US right now, excuse me, and which is more than the ganja that my neighbors used to grow way back not too long ago, because I live in San Pedro, Colombia. It's famous for that. And then things that subcanopy species that have expanding markets for that have been created. There's Naledo, which is exporting turmeric from Toledo's district, and turmeric is another excellent subcanopy species. And all of these species are anchor crops that provide for us. Lastly, we are faced with an unprecedented series of challenges right now. We have a rapidly expanding youth population. We have low levels of employment. Basically the engine of prosperity for Toledo district, and not for Toledo district, for the whole country, has been tourism, and tourism has collapsed in the face of COVID. So I think that there's potential to revert back to agriculture. It's important to remember that before the 1980s, or early 1990s, when Belize went fully into tourism, that the primary income earners for the country were fisheries, agriculture, and forestry. So I think that Belize has potential to work on ways to draw down atmospheric carbon. I think there's going to be the floodgates of international money are going to open very soon to assist farmers to do that. There are proven techniques. It can actually do it. We've been working on it for a long time, and actually we still work with the Commonwealth on that. And I think that we have potential in Belize to become leaders in this, and understanding this is not far removed from the cultural experience of Belize and Belizeans. That growing in diversified systems is the way people used to do things before we got dependent on tourism, and before monoculture agriculture became the dominant economic and productive model of agriculture. My name is Christopher Nesbitt. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for that great presentation. The work you're doing, Mr. Nesbitt, is crucial, and we're so grateful for it, and for you being here today to share it with us. Belize's natural resources are the foundation of generations of cultural vibrancy and diversity, and it's so important that we protect them and utilize them in a sustainable manner for future generations. So thank you for helping to make this happen. And to our viewers, I just want to remind you to make sure to leave your questions in the comments for Mr. Nesbitt and for our other presenters this morning. So next up, we have a presentation by Ms. Saidy Godette. Ms. Godette is the coordinator of the George Price Center for Peace and Development, owner of the Art Shack Belize, a gallery for Belizean artists and artisans. If you haven't been, please go check it out. Educated at the University of Guyana with a bachelor's in history and geography, master's in education from the University of the West Indies. She's here today to talk about her work with the preservation of aspects of the Maya culture through the adaptation of a national Cohune industry. Welcome, Ms. Godette.
Presenting on my paper. Hi there, this is Saidy Godette, and today I will be presenting on my paper, Preservation of Aspects of Culture through the Adaptation of a National Cohune Industry. This piece will seek to discuss how the adaptation of the Cohune industry in Belize is a positive step towards sustainability and conservation. While we would consider these two dimensions in the context of environment, it is really less linear than this. The Cohune industry is a step towards recognizing that in the 21st century, innovation need not be detrimental to tradition. Rather, it can be applied and cultivated in such a manner that it nurtures traditional practices. Through sustainable and conscious behavior, this presentation aims to show the value of transformative industry to cultural preservation. While the main focus of this presentation is on the Cohune oil industry, we recognize that the extraction of oil from the kernels of the Cohune nut is not necessarily a novelty in Belize, nor is the use of the nut in other ways a novelty either. The new objectives and methods to be incorporated, however, will be transformational, and those are what's novel. The Cohune nut can be eaten. When the nut is green, it can be consumed. Its nutrients are near identical to coconut. It can be used as fly brushes. It can be used for activated charcoal, fans, fermented for wine, used by the Maya in the past years and for centuries for thatch roofing. The palms, the ones that fall when burnt and run through a process, can be used to make salt. It is also a home for an epiphytic fern, which is used for Alzheimer's medication, and it's also used for the same nutrients that the Cohune nut is used for. If COVID-19 has shown us anything for the past year, is that there is need for additional local industries. We need to examine those areas that have tangible economic value. We need something that is uniquely our own, that incorporates all different types of industrial processes, and ensure that that particular industry is not only inclusive, but it is also innovative. The National Cohune Industry aims at applying technology to planting, protecting, growth prediction, harvesting, and extracting Cohune oil. The Cohune industrial plants apply technology and innovation, aim to diversify the types of products emerging from the palm. This type of project will then place a tangible economic value on the Cohune nut itself. As I mentioned previously, the Cohune bioindustry is a conservation one. The industry is working to collaborate with the Green Climate Fund, reforming and creating a new bioindustry that is uniquely Belizean. It will operate under the banner of bioindustry and transformation, with key objectives ensuring that Belize becomes a model for sustainable management and eventual elimination of its carbon footprint. The initial phase for accomplishing this will be the conservation of approximately 30,000 acres of rainforests, the incorporation of active surveillance and fire management strategies in many methods of attaining this goal. Coupled with this is the elimination of illegal slash and burn in the area and poaching of exotic animals. To ensure there is minimal disturbance and destruction of the rainforest, the use of GIS, drones, and LiDAR to monitor and track growth patterns will be integrated. Strategic reforestation is an important component of this project. This mitigates soil erosion and corrects damage done from previous illegal farming in protected areas. How can Cohune help culture then? It intends on adopting a number of approaches and models. One of the approaches would be the sustainable livelihood approach, where we incorporate such considerations as being people-centered, being responsive and participatory in all decisions, ensuring that partnerships that we have created are on multiple levels, ensuring sustainability economically, socially, environmentally, and institutionally. Also recognizing that the industry itself, as will the people, we will always be dynamic. It will be ever-changing. It intends on applying a culturally sensitive education system through various working groups across ministries. It also attends in that same area of education to have a co-op education plan, a program aimed at ensuring students are given real-world skills and opportunities within high school heading into college and university, the opportunity to be employed by the industry. This ensures economic sustainability and development. It is aiming for a sustainable future. All of these things, it should be mentioned, are linked. If we are going to be employing a culturally sensitive economic and co-op education system, then it will, in the long term, ensure a more economically sustainable future. In turn, with development of your mind and development of the industry comes the development of your area. Rural and village development through the industry, which intends, mind you, of being non-intrusive in terms of its environmental practices. But it recognizes at the same time that there needs to be infrastructural development in the area. We cannot consciously be within a rural area, develop a plant, and not have tangible infrastructural development, which would include health and the aforementioned educational facilities. Let's talk co-op. An academic program designed to complement a student's formal education with paid practical work experience directly related to the student's academic major. Training can range from engineering majors as well as retail sales and agriculture. In order to retain the status of your people or preserve a cultural group, there needs to be a valuable foundation of work. Cohune's co-op project will aim to ensure that education meets the needs of the youth. This promotes continuity, development, and therefore ushers in a new era of preservation, but one which is also strengthened by education and capital. Youth can save their cultures. Promoting a healthy appreciation for the uniqueness of the Maya and other cultures is now going to be paired with economic stability. The Cohune bio industry is not only an industry, it's essentially an ecosystem. And with that in context, we need to discuss that ecosystem and the model it intends to use, which is collective impact. There is a global urgency to employ responsible business strategies. More importantly, there is a need to recognize the power of what collective impact is. There are 5 conditions of collective impact, and these are the conditions which the Cohune industry intends to employ, and these are the conditions which will ensure the continuity of a lot of cultures, including the Maya culture in Belize. The 5 conditions include a common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and backbone support. As it relates to common agenda, all participants have a shared vision for change, including the common understanding of the problem. Now, we understand that the general problem here is sustainability, preservation. But it is a problem not because there is not a recognition of the importance of the culture, but is the problem comes when there is no education and economic development behind that. You will essentially lose your culture as your youth migrates, or they don't have a clear understanding of how important this particular culture is. When it relates to shared measurement, Cohune intends on collecting information, measuring results. Continuous evaluation tells us where we have gone wrong and how we can now employ all of our stakeholders, including all of these cultures, to ensure that we are not only accountable to ourselves, but remain accountable to each other. So if we intend on doing these co-op programs, if we intend on ensuring that there is a more culturally sensitive education system in those rural areas, then there needs to be shared measurement. Mutually reinforcing activities, participant activities must be differentiated, and we have established that we need to suit the needs of the people within the area. And this is how we intend on preserving culture. We have recognized that they have their own unique ways, their traditions, and we intend to work with that. But we also recognize that for true sustainability, there needs to be education. Continuous communication, consistent and open communication is needed across all stakeholders. This builds trust. We ensure that we have mutual objectives. Working groups across the country within all ministries are there to ensure, once they work along with our bioindustry, to ensure that we are continuously motivated and all stakeholders are gainfully employed in ensuring that not only the industry is successful, but the intended preservation of their culture is also successful. Backbone support, creating and managing collective impact requires a separate organization with staff and specific set of skills to serve the backbone for the entire initiative. This is where we employ non-governmental agencies as well. Remember, we recognize that continuously there have been efforts by governments, by non-governmental agencies, by aid agencies to assist in culture. But we also recognize that the real capital comes from those corporate agencies. You need the private sector, and the private sector needs you. So it's a reciprocal organization, and it is a reciprocal relationship. Thank you for listening. Let me leave you with these closing remarks. Once we understand the why, then the how comes into greater focus. We need our future generations to understand their traditions. However, the stark reality is that there needs to be development across all categories for this to happen. Cohune and culture are symbiotic. The history it shares with all cultures in Belize has endowed it with a responsibility to ensure that they are preserved. There are a few people who I wish to acknowledge before I close. Mr. Rudolph Castillo, the founder of Cohune Limited, who has, through numerous calls and conversations, contributed to this presentation. Dr. Angel Cal, who placed everything in perspective for me. The graphics team at the Art Shack, Dr. Neville Trotz, who provided valuable information on the scientific value of Cohune oil and the extraction of that oil, and the team at Heritage Education Network for allowing me to be part of this symposium.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Godette, for that for showcasing the diversity of uses and roles of Cohune in our broader ecology, economy, and culture. Your work complements the work of Mr. Nesbitt by highlighting the generational and native industries Belize has to grow from, especially in light of the weaknesses identified by an economy dependent on tourism in the midst of a global pandemic. We also appreciate the connections you make between natural resources, culture, and education. Here at HEMB, we aim to highlight these connections as well. So thank you so much, Ms. Godette. Finally, in our session on traditional ecological knowledge, we have Ms. Dassia Ucles. I hope I said that right. Ms. Ucles has always been interested in animals, which eventually led her into conservation work. She is the program coordinator for the Crocodile Research Coalition, and her job is to promote education and build an interest in stewardship and pride in local wildlife. The goal is to promote coexistence with crocodiles and other wildlife, which includes discussing how crocodiles were revered by the ancient Maya civilization. We will hear more about Ms. Ucles' work in her presentation, Crocodiles and the Mayas. Welcome, Ms. Ucles.
Hello. So today I'm going to be sharing a bit about crocodiles and what connections they had with the Mayas. However, that's going to be a little bit more end. No, I just want to share, before starting this presentation, I want to share a small song that was taught to me by my grandfather. And it goes like this. It's very short, but it means a lot, right? Because it connects us and our culture and our ancestors with their beliefs. Hular relish kutanki ishkunani nikakwa ishkunani liraila hora Jesu Cristo Mata utermano. Now, what does this song talks about? It's talking about brotherhood, sisterhood, working together and believing that there's a spiritual being that protects and guides us in our daily lives. And I think as human beings, we're not perfect humans, and I think we should always have that spiritual connection with other spiritual beings. So that brings us into the Maya and the crocodiles. So who is the CRC and what do we stand for? A lot of people would say the Crocodile Research Coalition itself is an organization that rescues crocodiles. Or in other words, like what the kids in St. Bite would say, we protect crocodiles. However, the CRC is more than just an organization / NGO that protects the species. We are an NGO that conserve them, yes, but we use different strategies in doing so. For instance, we do a lot of community involvement. We connect with the community, with the different cultures that we have in Belize. And we do a lot of educational outreach. We educate people about how important it is for us to conserve the species and what connections they have what the connection that they have with culture, with history, especially the Mayas. Crocodiles, way back, they had a strong connections with the Mayas. They even believed that they had crocodile blood in them. So our conservation work is more than just about conserving the species. Like I mentioned before, it has a lot to do with history. Now, I want to talk to you guys about Mayas and crocodiles. So when it comes to the Mayas, in Belize, they were the first inhabitants of Belize, the Maya people. And they were known to be the best weaver there was. They built beautiful pyramids / temples, archaeological sites. They were amazing agriculture men. They did everything by hand. They didn't use modern technology. They studied the stars. They had a wonderful connection with the universe, with Venus, the sun, and the stars. And one interesting thing that connects the Mayas and the crocodiles is Imish. So Imish is the first day of the Maya calendar. And for the Mayas, this day is honored. It's celebrated. And it's something that means a lot to them. It's a belief. And something that I find very interesting when it comes to working with the Crocodile Research Coalition here in Belize is that during the process, I have learned that they have a strong connections with the Mayas. And how is that connection? No, going back to Maya history and their gods, Mayas had a lot of gods. They believed in Venus. They believed in this god of sun, this god of, they had a lot of gods. However, when it came to imaged, they would pray. They would go and meditate near waters, near rivers, near ponds, where they would see crocodiles. Because in reality, scientifically speaking, crocodiles can be both in water and land. So that meant a lot for the Mayas, that they saw it in a very spiritual way. They believed that whenever a crocodile was spotted in a pond, that was because the Mayas were about to receive an abundance of blessings in form of food and water. So they would send warriors to guard that pond where that crocodile is until that crocodile would move on to another pond of water. So they believed that once they prayed to Image and honored that day, that they would receive a lot of abundance of crops. Agriculture would grow because of the water, the rain, the ponds. They will have drinking fertile water. It's like for the Mayas, like Image meant new beginnings. It also meant fertility, not just for agriculture, but also for women. They would have, new life, new beginning, new kids, new babies, reproduction. So it goes beyond just crocodiles. There is a strong connection. There's a strong deed within them and that history. So in today's world, like personally speaking, as a Belizean, I personally think that conservation of crocodiles should be seen in a different perspective. We're not just protecting crocodiles. We're trying to keep the culture of the Mayas, of the past ancestors alive. They still do have Maya people and even Garifuna people. I live in Saidy village, a fishing community whereby the saint is used to fishing. And whenever this fisherman go fishing, he would say, there's a crocodile there, so I know the fish is there. And if you look at it, back in the days, Mayas would do the same. When there was crocodile, where there was crocodile, there was water, there is fish. Crocodiles love their fish. So, people should learn to love and respect these animals for many other reasons. And it's not just for crocodiles, just wildlife in a whole. One, like I mentioned before, there is a connection with history. The only thing is that we need to research deeper and not just, okay, it's a crocodile, it's dangerous. No, we should go way beyond. So there's a lot of things when it comes to Maya history and crocodiles, right? Maya people, they built beautiful archaeological sites. And a good example of those that really stands out for me personally is Lamanai. Reason why it means Lamanai means submerged crocodile. Why did that name come about? No. So if you look at it, the archaeological site Lamanai is close, the New River is really close to it. So a lot of Belizeans, a lot of people would say, there's a lot of crocodiles in New River. And if you look at it, that's what it means, abundance of crocodiles. There are a lot of crocodiles in the areas. And the beauty about this is that people accept the fact that, okay, Lamanai is named after, Lamanai is submerged crocodile. That's what it means. So that means there's a lot of crocodiles in the area. We do have Belizean admitting, there's crocodiles. We see them. And it's really awesome that people understand and respects the fact that there's crocodile there. But at the same time, we can look at the bigger picture. Crocodiles and other different wildlife should be respected everywhere in the world by the same measures, no matter how small or how big they are or what species they fall under. Because, like, if you look at it, even compare crocodiles, yes, they were respected by the Mayas, and that's the reason why we want to educate people more about it so that people can start showing respect towards it. But at the same time, there are other animals that deserve protection, that deserve to be respected. We have jaguars. The Mayas also had a big relationship with them. However, today I'm just going to be talking about Image, the crocodile. but I just think that in general, we should protect all the different species. So image, right? So this is a painting to demonstrate, just a small demonstration of what image would look like after reading the story of Image, the crocodile. No, the Image, the Mayas the Mayas, they believe in a stronger connection. They saw the crocodile as gods, like I mentioned before. But what makes them really interesting is that the Mayas believed that the earth was resting on top of a crocodile's back. So basically, they believed that the world itself was on top of a crocodile's back. So crocodiles for them weren't just anything, or just any animal, right? So here says the Mayas venerated the crocodile as a symbol of life, a connection between the heaven and earth and the underworld. So it's full of mystery, but there was like deeper things than just crocodiles meaning new beginnings for them. It meant more than that, right? Going back a little bit to what the Mayas would do when it came to crocodiles, they would go to caves and they would look for crocodiles to make sure to guard them, to make sure that their young ones, whenever the crocodiles were nesting, were protected, they were not being poached, you know. So they were very protective of these animals. This is one of the reasons that we display this image painting, because it's more than just a painting, it's a connection between different dimensions. So yes.
Thank you, Ms. Ucles. We appreciate you and the CRC's community engagement and the connections you make between crocodiles and the broader ecology, cultures, and lifeways here in Belize. There's such a diversity of connections that I think most of the presenters have made today. So these connections, of course, come from the past and they're continued into today. So now we are about to transition into our live Q&A discussion. We're a bit early, so we have a decent amount of time. So I'll just remind our viewers that to please leave comments and questions in the comment section. So we will welcome Ms. Godette, Ms. Dassia, and Mr. Nesbitt. Welcome to our presenters. Good morning.
Hi, morning.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the great presentations and all of the work that you all are doing. So we have a question just to start off, and it's from Mr. Lee McLaughlin, who is also one of our presenters from the afternoon session today. Thank you for the question, Lee. He says, is there an intention to engage the Southern communities through the free, prior, and informed consent process? I believe he's talking about Indigenous communities here. Could this be approached as a dialogue rather than a possibly preconceived idea seeking approval? So I think that maybe if Mr. Nesbitt or Ms. Godette probably, I guess any of you could answer this question, right, in the work that you're doing.
I can start with that.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, now we have a model. However, it doesn't stand to say that we will not have consultations. It will begin with consultations, but we cannot begin the process without establishing a model first. So that's why we established that shared value and collective impact approach, so that we have an idea, but we still will have continuous dialogue. And that's something that I said before. We need to have continuous communication and evaluation with everybody that is involved. And when I say key stakeholders, I'm including all of those groups because all of them are key. So yes.
Absolutely. Mr. Nesbitt, do you have anything to add to that with your work?
Yes, actually, one of the things that's important to remember is that a lot of the needs that the example that we're talking about of multi-strat agroforestry systems, not a lot of the needs that they identify and address are needs that rural farmers have. How do we provide income? How do we provide food for ourselves? How do we prepare for the future? How do we repair land? How do we repair broken hydrological cycles and all of this? And so getting consent is really important. But one of the things is that I've lived in a Maya community for 32 years, and I worked in Toledo cacao growers, and I have a very good understanding of some of the problems that farmers face. And so what we're doing here is we're not specifically saying, hey, do this. We're saying, hey, this is what we've done, and this is what's working for us. So we get farmers who come here before COVID, and we show them what's working and point out the parts that we tried that didn't work. And so we're not necessarily getting consent because we're not working on a project actively with our neighbors right now, but it is by providing an example. We're not dictating.
Absolutely. And it seems like more of a dialogue, right? If I'm correct.
Yes. Yeah. The thing was, we were founded specifically because when I worked at cacao growers, we found that farmer-to-farmer exchanges were more valuable for farmers for information transfer. That the pedagogy of a classroom didn't work for information transfer, but actually you could take a farmer to another farm, and everything that they would have been taught in a classroom, they're learning right there, and they're seeing it. And farmers have very high degree of botanical and visual literacy, and they go to a farm and they look at it and they get it, they understand it. So that was the foundation of our work.
Absolutely, that sort of hands-on experience that you don't necessarily get when you're in a traditional classroom. It's so essential for that kind of work, right? Let's see. Miss Ucles, did you have anything you wanted to add with the work that CRC is doing? Are you aware of or engaged in free, prior, and informed consent process?
Hi. At the moment, I prefer not to share, but thank you.
Okay, sure, no problem. So let's go on to a next question. Okay, Kiara Williams, I think this is maybe her asking a question. How would someone go about wanting to join the CRC or wanting to help spread awareness about how important the crocodiles are to Maya culture? I think this is for Miss Ucles.
Hi. Let me see. Let me read the question again. Sorry.
Sure. She's just wondering how she can join CRC or engage with CRC.
Yeah. So you can always go to our website, and you'll find us as Crocodile Research Coalition. And you go to the website, go for the volunteering sections. We do offer a lot of volunteering opportunities to Belizean students and abroad. And yes, you can email me there. You can contact me personally, and I'll get you started in the volunteering program. And with the whole pandemic and everything that's been happening, so a lot of the things has been done virtually. So we do a lot of stuff virtually as well. And then you can always help us by raising awareness through education. And let me say, yes, education. And also, if you see a crocodile, if you see someone trying to kill a crocodile, just let them know, I don't think you should be doing that, or just contact the closest forest department that there is in the village. I think wildlife in a whole deserve the same respect as humans. So not just crocodiles, just any other species as well. So yes, that person can also raise awareness through them educating other people.
Right, their own community. Absolutely. We have one more question. Looks like for Mr. Nesbitt. Oh. Do you utilize traditional Maya farming techniques like terracing for soil retention? Yeah. I think maybe you mentioned somebody mentioned terracing at some point.
Yes, we do different kinds of terracing. We do what are called mechanical barriers, where we pile up either logs, or if we're close to the river's edge and we get rocks from the river, we have some terraces we created with stone. And then we also do terracing with botanical barriers using things like lemongrass or vetiver grass, or
things like pineapple, which are plants. They can also be done like hedgerows, traditional hedgerows that have been done all over the world, and you create barriers to accumulate soil. So yes, we have done that, and we've seen very good results with it.
That's great. I know that from archaeologically speaking, terracing has been present in the Maya area and Belize specifically for thousands of years. So, you know, it's a resilient strategy that we need to take advantage of and learn from. It's great. So we have another question. It looks like it's from Saidy. The Cohune nut is difficult to separate from its shell. Does this present a serious challenge for your oil extraction plans?
It does not, considering the technology that we intend on applying to the extraction of the nut. That is what separates the new Cohune industry from the more traditional practices that have been used. We intend on collaborating with 21st century technological advancements. So what we will do and what will change the entire industry is the technology and the scale of it. It's intended on being a large-scale industry. So technology is the defining strategy for this particular project.
That's great.
So it's not a challenge.
Yeah.
It's not a challenge.
Well, I think it's important that you're pulling from these sort of traditional industries, but bringing them into modern day and really taking advantage of them in great ways.
Well, that's the important thing, because again, what is something very important for this particular industry is that we recognize that there are traditional methods and there is tradition to be protected. Mm-hmm. That is one of the unique things of Belize. What was also unique is the oil. Mm-hmm. So we intend on merging those two, ensuring that we preserve not only the land, but the culture, but still apply 21st century skills. Because if we are to advance in the 21st century, just applying traditional knowledge is not going to work. Mm-hmm. We need to merge both.
Well, because these industries are bigger, right? We are a global economy now, and to be able to make a livelihood, we have to keep up with that.
And yes, COVID has taught us that we need to look internally as well. Yeah. We need to look internally, and agriculture is one of the answers. And the Cohune industry will be one of the answers for Belize.
Absolutely, that's great. We have one more. Well, we have time for a few more questions, but the next question is from Miss Anya Kass. She says, the degradation of land has become a risk factor for food security because overly degraded soils are no longer fertile. What are some of the strategies used to improving soil quality or to restore currently degraded soils in Belize? Maybe Mr. Nesbitt might ask.
Well, what we came up with the concept of mimicking the process of succession that we see in degraded landscapes naturally, the conversion from either a cattle pasture or citrus grove or banana plantation has been abandoned into wamil. And we look at different species, and we found some of the processes that are going on in that transformation. And we found analog species that perform some of the same functions that those species do. But most importantly for farmers, provide yields. So I mentioned a few of them, like the pigeon pea, which is an underutilized fruit here in Belize, but it's very common in the rest of the Caribbean. And things like bananas to improve soil structure, etc. Vetiver grass. There's a lot of different plant matter things that can be done. Mechanically, you can create terraces and to accumulate what soil does wash down, along with whatever biomass, and increase the amount of soil biota, particularly bacteria and fungi, which are sort of the foundation of fertility. So it's all about mimicking that, and that's what we've been working on for a while.
That's great. It's actually a personal question that I have, but I was wondering if any of you in your work are thinking about or have been engaging with the government to try to get some of these ideas into policy or anything of that matter. I don't know if that's...
When it relates to Cohune, there's always the conversation. The conversation is ongoing with the government. Of course, again, the government is one of the key stakeholders because it's the land. And we need to include them in working groups if we are to achieve the things that we just mentioned we wanted to achieve. For example, the co-op system, the development of rural communities. Of course, we need to incorporate all of those ministries into that conversation, and for their encouragement and their promotion of the particular industry. The question on soil degradation is interesting because one of the things that the banner that Cohune operates under is conservation. And that's the key, that's the beginning, that's the core of what we are establishing. Because in the beginning, our acres of land that we want to work on, those acres will be protected. And those acres of land are home to a diversity of animals, trees, etc. So we are essentially not going to be intrusive to the area with the exception of extracting the nut. And even the method of extracting the nut will not interrupt that natural habitat. So it is important to know that encouraging and investing in that particular industry is an investment in the reduction of your carbon footprint, in the reduction in the conservation of flora and fauna. So as it relates to degradation of soil, we intend to do a reverse of it, right? We intend on backpedaling and going back to where we are supposed to be, because if the recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has told us is that we are in dire need of conservation projects. And that's why we are pushing for that project. Yeah.
That's great. I sort of ask out of personal interest because I know Belize is set up and in the stage of readiness for REDD+ benefits, but that's sort of a governmental run policy. And I see a lot of your guys' work as really complementing that, right? Reducing the carbon footprint, reducing deforestation, and finding these sort of more sustainable ways to manage Belize's natural resources. And in a way, we can see that Belize will make it to the future, right, sustainably. So, so great job. You guys are doing wonderful work. We have a next comment/question from Miss Jenny Rosado. In school, we learn about the Maya calendar and a little about the ruins they built. Would it be possible to also teach about the connection on crocodiles and Maya to students to help spread not only awareness, but also a little bit more about the Maya culture that many are not aware of? I think this is to Miss Ucles. Are you muted, Miss Dassia? We can't hear you, Miss Dassia. I think you're muted. Here we go. You have to go and click on the unmute button just on your... Oh, I think she unconnected herself. We'll wait for her to get back on. Let's see. I think we have mostly questions for Miss Darcy. Okay.
Yes, sorry.
No problem.
Having a power outage lately, so I'm using data.
No problem.
So yes, so in regards to your comment, just to give a full summary of both. Here, the Crocodile Research Coalition, we do work closely with the government of Belize. And one of the reasons we try to work closely with the government, police, and people from the local communities is because we actually need them to be part of our conservation work. We want them to understand why we do it. And you don't know, just to get everyone involved. I think it's the people play a big role in the conservation work. It's not just about saving the species, but one of the things that I have been working on with the education section here at the CRC is doing a lot of education virtually with different schools, trying to reach as much people as possible so that we can carry across the message. I won't say every single Belizean here in the East, but as much people little as possible. And I think social media wise, that's a good strategy that I have been using to get to people about our conservation work. And also we have been working closely with Ministry of Education in creating stories telling the Maya and the crocodile connection so that it can be taught not just in primary school, but also like to high school so that they can go more in depth about their history. Because I also think the Maya culture and other different cultures should play a big role in any conservation work that is done here in Belize. But yeah, sorry.
No problem. That's great that you're involving, the ministries and getting that information out into the school system. Like you said, I think that this knowledge from Indigenous people from this area is really important for people to know who are now living in this area, right? This generational knowledge it's a generations of trial and error, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and we can learn from that, right? And continue to utilize that knowledge. Of course, with consent and free, prior, and informed consent, right? So I think we'll go. I think we have a question for me. I am not a presenter, but one of my co-directors, Ms. Sylvia Batty, asks me, how do you think your research can inform or aid these efforts? So a little bit of background about me. I have a PhD in anthropology, but my dissertation sort of reconstructed a history of human-environment relationships in the Mopan River Valley, so in western Belize. And so I have some data that's sort of relevant to understanding sort of the ways that the Maya of that particular region interacted with the environment, and how those interactions sort of impacted their social and political development. And then we also have evidence of a number of droughts in the area that ultimately ushered in a political collapse and a social collapse. So sort of this really complex interaction of many variables. So sort of an archaeological case study of the things that we can learn from to inform what we're doing today. So I see a lot of parallels in my work and what you guys are showing and showcasing about the knowledge that we can use today, right? And learn from the past. So I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. It's important. So moving on from that, thank you, Ms. Batty, for asking that question. We have from Ms. April Martinez to Ms. Ucles, I think. Do you feel that people are receptive of the information you share on Maya representations of the crocodile? Have they heard of this information before?
Hi, Ms. April. So the CRC, we do focus a lot on education. So our mission here at the CRC is to to study crocodile conservation. Crocodiles in the country of Belize through research, community involvement, and education. We do believe that education is key. So learning new concept of anything, even if when you're doing conservation work here in Belize. And so one of the things that we have been doing is reaching out to different organizations, different schools. My goal when COVID-19 started and the pandemic, when everything just went virtually, was to reach out to all the schools in Stanford and also in East City. And it was basically just to do a virtual education presentation about crocodiles, and which included Mayas. It's like a full presentation, basically talking about how we can coexist with these animals. So my purpose is to, further off this education of crocodilians, not through just this district or that other district, but to Belize, the country itself, because I personally think that this is very vital for different level of education and just all ages, and it's very important because crocodiles contribute to our ecosystem. It doesn't only provide food and etc. to Belizeans or to people, but it also helps scientifically wise and ecological wise to our habitat, the fish, the corals, and so forth. So I think this is the reason why education and this should be taught, like I wouldn't say like a subject at school or university level. I think it should be mentioned in like okay, social studies, have like a little clip or a little part section there that talks about crocodiles, the relationship crocodiles had with the Mayas, jaguars, the relationship the Mayas had with the with the Mayas. So I think that should also be involved, and then from there on, just let it flow into the habitat and so forth. I just think it should fall underneath social studies.
Yeah.
That's like my personal perspective of how I view it, and that's like one of my goals here at the CRC to, let it be known more as something that falls as important. Because then it's part of our history, it's part of our first people that came into Belize, like the first people who inhabit Belize. So it's, I always say Maya's a legend, but in general, I just think history plays a big role into the Mayas and wildlife here in Belize.
Yep, absolutely. And I think it's really important, like you said, to get this knowledge out there, but we also have to remember that the indigenous peoples in Belize already know this. They know these things. So if we engage with them and dialogue with them in a respectful manner, I think they could also play a really important role in the education system. Coming in and teaching classes or things like that, right? They have this knowledge, and we can all benefit from it if we share.
So one of the other things that I think also been working for us at the CRC when it comes to the education, sometimes my boss would say, "Okay, Darcy, people might just get tired of you, okay?" But I do believe in consistency. I will email the teacher. I'll be like, "Hey, can you do a presentation tomorrow or this coming week?" She won't answer during the day, so I'll ask again the following day, then ask the next day. I do believe in consistency. I think that's when it comes to education and getting message across to people. But if you just say like, "Can I come tomorrow? It's to do this and that," and you never message back because they didn't, then they won't look at it as something that's important. Okay, she just wanted to come here and waste time. So I think consistency is very important, and also involvement. Have make people feel like they belong in that area. So
absolutely.
With COVID-19, I was like, "Hey girl, do you guys want to come volunteer at the CRC? We do terrestrial survey at the land. We go looking for snakes and spiders and so forth." We let them feel like, okay, you're the future biologist, future scientist. We want to have, we normally give people the full experience of what it is to work in the conservation field, what it is to get. Conservation is not just about being behind a computer, it's also about getting dirty, it's also about looking at bones, it's also about, studying their species, their anomaly, and it goes on and on. But I think it is a very beautiful thing to get involved in general.
Absolutely. I actually have a question that might sort of overlap all of your guys' work. I know that when we encourage forested and sort of agroforestry ecosystems, that we also introduce the potential for other animals to live in those systems with humans. And of course, that creates the potential for conflict, right? So snake bites and jaguars. And so we see this human animal interface sort of overlapping quite a bit in those ecosystems. So is this something that you guys have thought about, I suppose, Ms. Godette and Mr. Nesbitt, in your work, and sort of how you might inform the farmers or the practitioners about that kind of interface that they're going to start to interact with more?
Well, we live in an area, we've seen all the cats, ocelot, puma, margray, jaguarundi. We had our dog was taken by a jaguar the other day. We had another dog that got killed by a fertilizer. It's just about, where we live here and they kind of live here too, and we have to work with them. I was sad the jaguar took my dog, but there are lots of dogs in the world and there's not that many jaguars left. And the indication is that the jaguar is either old or disabled because he's taken a lot of dogs in the watershed. When my neighbor down the river about a mile lost, I don't know, 3 or 4 dogs, and my neighbor across the river lost 5 or 6 dogs, we've only lost 1. So it is what it is, and but there's not that many of them. One of the things when you're doing agroforestry, we've created habitat that attracts animals. So we have booty and givenot, brocket deer come in, and because that comes in, the predators come in to look for them as well. So that's it's just the nature of the game. Understanding, of course, that like the agouti, they eat a lot of the fallen food, the bread nut. If we don't go and police that up every day, they come in every now and then. I'll go shoot an agouti and then feed it to my dogs because you know, they're part of the ecosystem, and I don't feel any kind of way about a few dead agoutis because there's lots and lots and lots and lots of them. But apex predators like jaguar and all the cats, there's not that many of them. We have to learn to create agricultural models that take that into consideration and work around communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when it comes to he was talking about there's many other dogs left. That's very true. I don't own any dogs of my own because one, I'm always busy. So when it comes to CRC, we have facility. The CRC, we have an enclosure / land where we have crocodiles in rehab. So they will never go back into the wild because one, they were kept as pet. They don't know how to be crocodiles.
Yeah.
So the CRC team, we normally have to target train the crocodile. We literally teach them how to obey commands. Like we have one of them, his name is Gilly. We tell Gilly, come, he comes out. So they're very smart animals. We tell him come, we tell him stay. He understands and follows basic commands that have been said to him for a while. So they will never go back into the wild. But this is again because of human action of keeping them, poaching eggs and keeping them as pets, which is illegal, by the way. And
Yes.
then, no, when it comes to whenever it comes to the interaction between us and them, safety comes first. Dr. Tejas, who's the founder of CRC, she always says this: do not give your back to the crocodile when you're turning back or when you're heading out of the gate or out of the enclosure. Do not get too close to it. So our safety comes first. She has taught us different method strategies that we now use to target train these crocodiles. So even though we do have an interaction with them, we do have in mind, we bear in mind that safety comes first. So we keep our distance when it needs to. And whenever we have volunteers locally or from abroad, we sit with them, we let them know, okay, this is what you can do and this is what you cannot do. So we always, look at safety of everyone's first before doing something that's. So we always tell our interns, this is not Steve Irwin's kind of thing. So just keep in mind that you need to keep your distance because your safety comes first. Yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Cohune industry, as I mentioned before, we intend on incorporating more technology. So it's technologically intensive. And because it's a conservation project, we intend on being relatively non-intrusive in the areas that we are doing the harvesting. Technologically intensive meaning that even the surveillance of the growth of the cohune is done through LiDAR. The extraction of the nuts will not be done with people, will be done with cableways. So it's a different method that we're incorporating because we have taken into consideration that we are operating under conservation. And because we're doing that, we do not want to have much interaction with people, and we do not want to disturb the natural habitat of that particular area. So we have done the studies and we intend on just using technology. Now, even though it's technologically intensive, it's also skill intensive. So we intend on doing the training that comes with that. And also what comes with that is active protection, active surveillance of the area to ensure that there is not illegal poaching or milk farming done in that particular area is extremely important. So that's how we intend on mitigating those issues in terms of interaction with the natural habitat, the animals in their habitat, and human interaction. So we intend on keeping that at a minimum, but at the same time getting the products that we need to get.
Sure, absolutely. Keeping safety in mind, right?
Yeah.
And doing that. Well, it looks like we're out of time for our question and answer discussion session, but I would encourage you guys the presenters to go in the comment section, and if you, there's still some comments and questions that you might find you should respond to. So, and I just want to thank you all for being here today, and I really hope that you see connections to maybe to collaborate, and if HENB can help in any way, we are always here. And I want to remind our viewers that we will be back after a short lunch break at 12:30 for our afternoon sessions, starting off with creative arts and Belizean heritage. So this will actually sort of lead into some of the things we just discussed. So we look forward to having you there. And thank you again to our presenters.
Thank you.
Having us.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.